Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlickers, shill stuffs, lacers, pests, vassals, minions. I'm a useful idiot. Welcome. And today I want to talk about Israel again, of course. But today I want to talk about the kind of weapons and munitions they're using in Gaza. And the inevitable argument I'm probably going to get from certain corners is that, well, armies all over the world have used these on the battlefield, including the United States. And that's very well true. We have Russia and the United States, of course, using these type of weapons in the field. But there's some things about the way Israel uses them, of course, that sets them apart. And a couple of these reasons are the fact that, first of all, they're using these not on an opposing military per se, but against the civilian population. And the second part of that quotient is the fact that they are using these weapons in a very densely populated, one of the most densely populated areas in the world, urban environment, crammed full of civilians. And so the fact that they're using these kind of weapons means a couple things. One, they're doing it on purpose. They want the desired results. They want the collateral damage. So these protestations that are coming from Israel about how they have this pinpoint accuracy and they're trying to reduce collateral damage and unnecessary civilian death is undermined by the fact that they use weapons that actually do all three: go after civilians, do indiscriminate damage and a large amount of collateral damage, and are intended to do so. And in fact, what we have is a quote from David Halpin. He's a British surgeon and trauma specialist, and he's speaking about the 2009 incursion into Gaza, and a lot of these same weapons were used in Gaza at that assault, and they're being used this time too. And he says, quote, "We have seen Gaza used as a laboratory for testing what I call weapons from hell. I fear the thinking in Israel is that it is in its interest to create as much mutilation as possible to terrorize the civilian population in the hope they will turn against Hamas." So, yeah, terrorize the population. Terrorism, terrorize. And the idea that the horrible nature of the wounds would be so bad that the people would rise up against Hamas. Certainly a pretty interesting theory, a theory only. But let's take a closer look at some of these weapons. One of the more controversial is called DIME, or Dense Inert Metal Explosives, developed by the U.S. Air Force in 2006. And in fact, the fact that Israel used them as far back as 2006, as well as in 2009, means they were using them in the development stage, and they were completely unregulated, and a lot of times prototypes. So that seems to uphold David Halpin's view that Gaza is being used as a laboratory for testing these new weapons. And what the hospitals and doctors would see would be severed or melted limbs, people decapitated mostly in the lower limbs, and there'd be internal ruptures and sliced bone. And this is all with no shrapnel per se. They're used to seeing shrapnel wounds, shards of metal. They create very obvious wounds and very obvious damage. But this stuff is almost like a powder, and a lot of it is tungsten, which incidentally causes cancer. So should you survive multiple amputations and internal injuries, you will have cancer eventually. Anyone within 10 meters of one of these ordinances is cut to pieces, and a lot of strange injuries that can't be treated. And because it's like a hot dust, that's why you end up with these melted limbs. And in fact, the same doctor went on to describe the wounds from using these dense inert metal explosives. Quote, large chunks of flesh and muscles were cut away. We didn't find any shrapnel, and the wounds emitted strange fumes. We had a large number of patients who came in with horrendous injuries where arms and legs were cut off as though a huge axe had chopped them off with a direct, immense force, cutting through skin, muscle, and bones. Bones would be shattered and completely cut off. In addition, we saw very, very destructive burns coming from some extreme temperature that turns skin, muscle, and even bones into charcoal, unquote. So these are the kind of weapons that are being used in a dense urban environment against civilians, expecting collateral damage. And then we also have what are called flechette shells. And this is a shell fired from a tank that releases thousands of tiny metal darts. And as one would expect, they cause horrible injuries because they explode in the air and then blast a 300-meter radius in a cone-like configuration. Thousands of tiny metal darts, and there's pictures of those darts attached below that show nails about this big with wings, so it makes them shoot out fairly accurately at a straight angle. Then we also have something developed by the Israeli army called the Kalanet, and it's an anti-personnel munition, and instead of tiny metal darts, the casing explodes and sends out hundreds of metal discs. And so we know what kind of damage a weapon like that would do. Once again, we get these horrible injuries, and a lot of injuries that cannot be treated and leave a lot of mutilation and certainly send a very loud message to the Palestinians from Israel. And this goes along with also the use of white phosphorus. We haven't seen that so much in this assault on Gaza, but we've seen it before in 2009. And once again, that's nothing new. The United States used it in Iraq, and Russia used it in Chechnya, and other countries do use it. It's generally used as a cloud cover for offensive moves by your own troops, but when used against your adversary, it causes a lot of burns, and it's very deadly indeed. And then we have also the old classic cluster bombs, and we haven't had any reports of cluster bombs as of yet in Gaza right now, but they've used them before in Gaza assault, so would not be surprised that they're using them again. And then we also have uranium-based warheads. So we have craters that have been measured that have radiation, and that belies the fact that a lot of these missile warheads are uranium-based. And so we look at the list. We have white phosphorus, cluster bombs, flechette shells, Kalanet, dense inert metal explosives, uranium-based warheads, and then all the usual drones, Apache helicopters, gunboats, tanks, artillery, hand grenades, etc., etc., etc. But one of the things that's interesting about this particular munitions that we see, it actually has quite a long history. It goes back at least to the Napoleonic Wars, and it was also used in the U.S. Civil War. And it's called grape shot, and that would be different, various size metal balls packed into a bundle and fired out of cannon. It was devastating, certainly on infantry charges. So now we have something that was devastating on the battlefield against opposing armies, but now we find the heir to the grape shot of previous 19th and 20th centuries. Now we see these same kind of weapons leveled against civilian populations and women and children and innocent bystanders. And one of the other things that makes this whole thing a little diabolical and sets Israel apart is the fact that they use the lab results, these assaults on Gaza and Lebanon, where they test these weapons. They end up using these as a promotion device. And so arms buyers and security industry buyers around the world give accolades to the Israelis because everything they sell is battle tested. And not only that, they use video footage and material from these Gaza onslaughts as promotional material to sell their military equipment and their armaments. And so a little bitter irony to all this. And I've attached some examples below of video footage that's already been processed and used from this latest Gaza onslaught is now being already in the world as a marketing promo video showing how it works in the battlefield, or the so-called battlefield in Gaza. So once again, that seems to substantiate the ideas that Gaza is a laboratory for testing military equipment for the Israeli military-industrial complex. The fact is these wars are filmed in order to make promo videos for that same military-industrial complex, and the fact that we have extremely brutal weapons and armament, and definitely weapons from hell being used in one of the most densely populated areas on Earth, with nothing but potential collateral damage, with horrible mutilations and the kind of death that one would wish on no one. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.